always forget. I can't remember how we start these things.
No,
Usually, we'd get chatting first, and was how.
Chewy and Jim, chatting along on their old pod feed. Chewy and Jim, HR keeps them afloat. We go to play and have a look with Chewy's gags, Jim's dashing looks. The world wishes their views were tame, so Chewy and Jim just take the blame. Chewy and Jim, just get on with the show.
Yeah, that's exactly how we usually start it. I usually interrupt you, isn't it?
I was just thinking. What's really funny is people will think we edit that in, but we actually just sit here waiting for that whole song to play.
And usually I get a chance to do that. Yeah, we have to endure that just the same as you guys, and we've listened to it even more than you guys. So sorry about that. Apologies for the jingle as ever. Also, that was a bit glitchy for me. So if it's glitchy for everyone else, and it just happens to be our internet signal, then that's even funnier. It prolonged it even more. It was even more awkward. So
there was no glitching on my end. What's also funny for me this time around is because I've started the stream, and so it's not Chewy and Jim, it's Jim and Chewy. So I don't know how that'll record.
Grab me and move me over.
No, I refuse to grab you.
Get a continuity error. Continuity error. Yeah.
No grabbing.
There we go.
No grabbing. We're back. I also feel like it's worth telling people that we forgot to record this last week, and so we're scrambling to record late, and it's also the hottest day in the history of planet Earth.
Yeah. I just briefly went outside. I thought it'd be good. I could wear my favorite hat, and then it was too hot to function. So yeah, back inside. And we did forget. But what's funny is that, of course, it was only forgetting to record. We'd obviously prepared the perfect show, and it's now just about delivery. So we can get on with the show, right? So you were frothing at the mouth, angry about something as usual. Tell the listeners, tell the viewers.
Yeah. So we as a family, we've been interacting with the healthcare system quite a lot recently. My wife's not been very well. And we've had some good and some bad consultations. I've been to some of them, and I've not been to all of them. So I wanted to talk about a bit of the differences between running a good consultation and running a bad consultation. And I think there's some really important lessons that we can learn, and I think that it really impacts the experience of the person. And I'm not talking about, this is separated from the restrictions of the system. Like, we all know people lack time sometimes, and with appointments, especially if you go to your GP surgery, for example, particularly prevalent there. You're lucky if you get 6 or 7 minutes, and it's hard to book appointments and stuff. So separate to that, but the actual running of the consultation itself, I think, is a really overlooked skill that I think maybe is being lost from the healthcare system, or because of time and stuff. And so there's two particular ones that I want to talk about. One that made me annoyed, and then the other one that saved me.
Contrast that, because that's sometimes a good way of people understanding the framing, isn't it? Correct. Contrast a good and a bad experience.
So we went. They happened in order as well. So the not so good one was first, and then the really good one was second. So the not so good one, we went in, and it shouldn't laugh because it's probably indicative of some problem. But the lady. She called us into the waiting room, and the first thing that she did when we sat down was take a massive bite of a chocolate digestive biscuit. And I the normal size of a chocolate digestive biscuit, right? She must have bitten off 80% of the chocolate biscuit. She didn't introduce herself. This is the first thing that she did, and it was such a big bite of chocolate biscuit that she was then covered in chocolate biscuit crumbs, and then proceeded to start the consultation with a mouthful of chocolate biscuit. and then was just covered in chocolate biscuit for the whole thing. But
I hope you're gonna get into some technical things that people can learn from it. Because if people come away from Chewy and Jim just being like, don't eat chocolate biscuits.
But the whole consultation continued in this vein. So not only did she start it like that, she proceeded to continue eating another 2 chocolate biscuits throughout the consultation. Which was just really strange.
Did she ever reference
no.
it? Did she ever say, it wasn't like, do you mind if I eat?
No.
Sorry, I need to. My blood sugar's low.
No, nothing. And it was just very strange. But to me, it was like it was the funny part of the whole consultation. So there was no introduction. We left the appointment, and because I didn't make the appointment, I just went. I didn't know what her job, like I didn't know she was a nurse, a doctor. I didn't know her name. I didn't know anything about her other than the fact that she eats chocolate biscuits in her consultation. But it also...
It's fairly legal. Are you sure you didn't just see a fellow patient that was just
wanted
to stay in the air conditioning?
Could have done. So there was that, and she was, I would say, she was very abrupt in her questioning. So she would interrupt and to steer the consultation where she wanted it to go, but it was very abrupt and sharp, and it didn't feel like it was a two-way conversation, if that makes sense. And my wife, who is my wife, left the appointment very upset and feeling like nothing really had moved forward, and it wasn't very good. Conversely, we then went to an appointment more recently, about 10 days ago, and the consultant who we saw, that again, lady, not that it matters, but that we saw her, and entirely the opposite. So no chocolate biscuits were eaten. Just to point that, but we went in. She introduced herself, what her job was, why the appointment had been made, what the aim of the appointment was, and then she was still, the real contrasting part for me was she was still very direct with the way she moved the conversation, but she didn't interrupt. She guided my wife is very, she's very much like you. Why say 5 words when 1,000 will do? And she'll go all over ask her a question about the weather, and we'll be talking about food within 3 sentences.
Yeah, for very good reasons. Me and Lauren are kept apart for several reasons.
Oh God, several reasons, yeah. And so it's, those two parts, like two north parts of a magnet, they just shouldn't meet in my life.
It's the unstoppable force meets the immovable object.
Yeah, correct.
And lots of energy would form, yeah.
And the way that she moved the conversation where it needed to go was it felt very smooth, and it felt very, she was still, like I say, she was still very direct and to the point, and, to make the most of the appointment time that we had, but it didn't feel rude, which the first conversation did. Now, how much of that in my memory is the consultation started badly on the first one and started well on the second one, I don't know. So that there's some of that, but it just felt like she had a real skill of maneuvering the conversation where it needed to go to make the most out of it, what she needed to know, what we needed to get out of the appointment, etc. And it just really highlighted to me how I just think that it's a really overlooked skill. The technical aspect of conducting a consultation and we used to, I remember ages ago when social media was more usable, we used to have lots of conversations about these soft skills. People would call them soft skills. And that's kind of what it is. It's that, you can be as good, medically or with your assessment as you want, but if you can't guide the consultation and keep the patient on board and happy and engaged, then they're going to leave unhappy. and not getting what they want out of it. So that's what I wanted to say, really. I mean, I don't know if you've got any thoughts and experiences on the same thing.
Yeah, well, I definitely want to just ask a little more, if I can, to tease out some detail on it, because I recognise absolutely what you're describing, and I think it is something that could easily be neglected. I think one of the things that's interesting, and it takes an awful lot for me to pump your tyres up, especially on air, but one thing that we've had a number of compliments on in your direction over the years, where we've had patients, lay patients, but also peers of ours in the education and influence space that then have consulted you as the rheumatology physio, have commented and reviewed that your consultation skills and expectation management and laying the cards on the table is an overused expression of mine. You do brilliantly. Now, obviously, I make sure I challenge that liberally when they do compliment you, and I clarify. I also love the joke that he's doing that because he just wants it to be over with, because he's having to talk to another human. And so, it's good that it's good that it's good, but also the underlying motive behind it is questionable, which I doubt you'd want to disagree with, by the way. That's not even banter. But when that is a known skill of yours and you rightly put a lot of value in it, and you see a lot of complex second opinion work and all that sort of stuff, right? And you need to understand the context, I bet that must bristle even more. Like, you're that person that's privy to the good, the bad, and the ugly, and you witness that yourself. I'm trying to work out then, are you going into that fairly highly tuned for that? Like, because you're so familiar with that context, or like, how are you engaging with that?
Yeah, I don't think I really thought about it. Certainly not beforehand. It was only after the second consultation, which was starkly different to the first one, that I really thought about the actual how problematic the first one was. And I've not really, luckily for me, I've never really required much in the way of the healthcare system from an individual point of view. And so I haven't really experienced the other side particularly. So obviously, like you say, if someone could give me the number of the consultations that I've done since I qualified, it would be, I wouldn't like to know that number, but from being a receiver of that, maybe two. Like I've been very lucky, or I omit to concern about any health issues.
Yeah, but that's the thing. I think it's part luck and part that you there's loads of underlying issues of which you've yet to pursue a diagnosis from.
Yeah. So then going into those appointments, I didn't really have any expectations, and I was there as a support mechanism. I wasn't really there. I'm not even there. I'm not really on the receiving end of it. So in some ways, I had this sort of step back to watch the consultation. It was almost like supervise. If you supervise a student, it was kind of like that, really. And then I was sort of pitching in where required. So yeah, I didn't really have any expectations in it, and I suppose it probably does. That, like you say, the complex cases I've seen, and also the misunderstandings that people, when they come to me now with as second opinion, the misunderstandings they've got from their previous consultations, and I don't know whether those consultations have gone well or badly, but they come with these and they take so much time to unravel and address, and then you see this happening in real time, and you just think it seems like small things to change, and they can make such a big difference. The relaxing nature I found on the second appointment, when we sat down and she introduces herself and she explains who she is and what she does, comparative to the first one, when you're just sort of, you have no idea. Like, is this person gonna take a blood test? Are they going to make some diagnosis? Can they do that? I don't know.
They've also not got. It's funny because it's not the main thing they need to achieve in an appointment, but they've no authority. Without that clarity, even if they then delivered what might have been absolute brilliance in accuracy, diagnostically or for proposed treatment, they've no authority with you anyway, and it'd be really hard for you to receive that. I think that we rarely do this, but I just think it might be useful for you if you can give us top 3 don'ts and top 3 do's. What would which can be spelt out from those contrasts. I'm going to give you the first don't is the biscuits, right? Don't eat biscuits throughout the appointment.
Two don'ts. So I think, so do is definitely its name. I suppose I don't know whether you could describe it as job role or
role.
Role.
You need to legally. You need to state your profession, really, as well. If they don't know that already, that's only fair under your regulation.
Yeah, and also like what I try to do in my sort of opening bit when I say who I am is like it's just sort of an expectation of the running of the appointment. So I'll say something like we've got this amount of time. I obviously I'm lucky I get an hour, so I'll say we've got a full hour to discuss what's going on, and then afterwards I will write you a summary letter which I will send to you, and that will happen within 24 hours. And that's how I open it. So like we have this amount of time, so because I remember when I used to be restricted, especially when I did the short job in orthopedics, short stint in orthopedics, and we have 5 or 6 minutes for appointments, and people would be watching that, they're thinking, oh my goodness, I'm running out of time already, and just sort of that expectation management. And then within the appointment, I think the key, and it's a really difficult skill, I don't know whether I've accidentally learnt it or I've learnt it over time just seeing lots of people or whatever it is, but this difference between interrupting to keep the consultation on track and guiding the consultation, I think that was really stark in those 2 appointments. Cutting off mid-sentence is so abrupt and sort of jarring, and I don't know if I can even really describe how the second lady did it, but she was still interrupting, but it was at appropriate almost pauses, like where a sentence ended, and she'd be like, okay, what about this? Or do you know what I mean? Whereas the first lady, it didn't matter where you were in the sentence, she'd just start another question.
Yeah. I think, do you remember, I mean, our friend and colleague Andy McCauley says, just learn how to be sound. It's just such a fun thing from an Irishman, because he just is, and it's like hard to teach because he's just he's a fun bloke, but good to be around in all contexts. But you can also imagine his consultations, especially because he'll put the professional parameters around it and not just riff. But he also is amenable, and over a pint, he'd know how to contribute and banter without interrupting and make everyone feel safe. And so you can just imagine that, and it's a hard thing because some people just don't have it. It's funny because I talk too much famously. I interrupt too much famously as well, because I'm so excited for the fact that I've already I know how you're going to finish that sentence, so you needn't bother, and then I kind of do that, and it's sort of part of my quirks, of which aren't an excuse and don't make it okay. But then, fortunately, for those that worry that version of the podcast to social media me is then what is taken to a consultation and clinical thing, is that no, I'm busy not being me for most of the consultation, and I do try and hold that back. But similarly, there are times where it's appropriate to recognize when to interject, and the way in which you can use body language to let someone know that you're keen to, or that and those are subtle tells that some people pick up on really naturally and socially, and others that take training. I think that the way in which you and I have kind of come to that would have been different. If anyone could map the causal chain to how you lead to that being better, I reckon there would have been different, because we're socially different characters. But I know watching you lead interviews in other contexts, right? That's one of the things that we now do for a living outside of patient care. I don't think that's coincidental. And whilst still work to be done always on that, we're sort of known to be, at least in our small pool of it, better than not at that, and comfortable with it, I guess. And that we go from seeing a patient about their problems, often bringing second opinion work, including the trauma of poor consultations before, that you're trying to make sure you contrast. Then we stop that consultation and we go into speaking to a professor about their latest research, and we need to be able to adapt that, but we do so with the confidence of being like, they know what they know, and we just need to make sure we listen, and then we contribute our skill where appropriate, is not dissimilar in some ways, even though the subject matter is different. And so I can so imagine that. Obviously, for those, whenever we're reflecting on this, I get frustrated because I immediately think to get well soon to Lauren, and I know what you guys have been going through and things. I wanted to, if you're happy to talk about it, just a little insight, because it kind of brings me on to something I'm keen to rant about off the back of it, is how has it been for you as a family, having still going through this, but also some of the challenges of the mysteries and the varied care and all that sort of stuff. How has that been, and what have the consequences been on you as a family?
Yeah, it's been really hard. In a lot of ways, and we're lucky in that obviously I'm in healthcare, and although Lauren isn't in human healthcare, she's in veterinary healthcare, and so understands a lot of the medicine, and so we're coming at it from a point of relative understanding compared to someone who is a layperson, and understanding of the systems. Like we can get around I can get around the systems. I understand the jargon when people have written letters. And if we don't understand all the jargon, we can very quickly understand it through a bit of Google. And so I feel like, we've struggled to do it, and it's still, and we're as high up on understanding how to not struggle as we could have been. And I think one of the main things for me is the time that it's taken logistically. Lauren needs a blood test, and it must have taken 90 minutes yesterday to arrange the blood test, never mind going. And then it was funny because, well, it's not funny, it's very annoying. They offered her an appointment. Next week, but she's away for work, and so she can't do that, obviously, and the next one is in a month. And it's like, how is this rigidity of this system so unusable? So you've got that, and then you've got the time reading these letters and phone calls to understand what's said in the letters and what's coming up. And I think there's a lot could be saved just having in letters, for example, just what's going to happen next. There's a lot of reporting as to what happened. There's not a lot of reporting as what will happen. And then
that expectation again.
And then you're like, oh, we haven't heard from this person in 6 or 8 weeks. Are they going to contact us? Do we need to contact them? When are we due for another appointment? Will we find out about this? And technology is not helping. Honestly, we have this app thing that our GP surgery uses, and so often we will be able to see blood test results or scan results or consultation things that have been loaded in there before the GP has seen it or reported on it or done whatever, and that is not helpful. When there's any concern and then you see stuff that is then unfiltered, it's like, and we are, I'm able to talk her down if that is an issue, or we're able to talk about it because we have that expertise. But people that were lay people, it would just be frightening, some of the stuff you're able to access. And I just don't think that's a healthy move forwards for everybody.
No, people sometimes feel like there's a temptation for radical transparency, but don't realise that means that then jargon, unfiltered jargon, is going to then be, especially punched into social, into Google AI, LLMs.
Yeah, there's this funny thing on that app as well. That's like, so the blood tests, you see the blood test, and then it says checked by something bot, and then so we've had on loads of conversations about, is this just being AI checked and actually not being seen by a clinician? Now, we've not actually gone and asked, and that's partly because our GP surgery is particularly unapproachable. But there's that concern as to whether it's actually being checked by a clinician, and it's just small things like that are just really add a lot of stress to the whole situation, which just don't need to be there.
Yeah. No, there've been so many angles and elements to that I obviously hearing about now, but also know about from us being in touch, and it just the lack of knowing and that expectation and not knowing what to expect, not knowing when to chase, when to let it be, when to respect the fact that there's challenges and strains within the system, but then also recognizing that there's certain inefficiencies that are nothing to do with time. The variation in care, I mean, it's so hard for me to not go off on one. It's like a classic thing that I whinge about is variation in care, particularly in MSK, but we see that across the board. And that's one of the things that I've developed a far deeper annoyance of as a retort over the years than I did. It never bothered me much. It felt a bit glib, but it was like mildly annoying. Now it really rankles me. Is that one of the big defenses? People think of it as a defense when I then rant about variation in MSK care and quality, because that's our wheelhouse. A defense that people seem to think is a defense. They go, we have no evidence that it's any worse than anywhere else. They accept it's bad, and they go, no, so variation again. Now, I never have suggested that this isn't our version of a problem, but that the complacency that can occur, as if I've just suggested that that's a human detail that cannot be refined, that no other industries managed to do, and that what we do have data for is that the variations in care standards do vary by country, by system, right? So it's that's where there are processes and channels that can be done there. Now, the system is broken enough for it to be challenging, no one's doubting. But what really frustrates me is the complacency that can occur over that variation. So go back to your consultation idea, is that are we genuinely suggesting that human temperament and human variation of those two clinicians is so impenetrable that you couldn't refine the bad and demonstrate the good as a means of both carrot and stick refining of behaviors? It's like, no, and that's where it becomes like, what needs to be rules and what needs to be suggestions? What needs to be the stick? One of the sticks is no biscuits in the consultation room. Right? I know we're using this as a silly cartoonish example, but it's just like, that is a disciplinary action if we find crumbs on your desk again, right? It's like the student that won't put their phone down, and you say, like, the one thing you've got to do is keep your phone out of your hand. You're found with your phone in your hand again in a work day, you are going to fail this placement. And if they can't physically do it, regardless of what compulsions or challenges they have with that, or what needs they have for it, if that's been decided on, they've agreed to it, they can't do it. It's like biscuits in the consultation room. Failing to name yourself, your title, your role. These are the processes, right? That becomes mandatory. That's the stick. Then the carrot is training needs over how you interject in such a way to move a conversation, recognizing that it can't all be wild narrative, especially someone like me or Lauren turns up, then you know you've got to refine that conversation. But also there's a terseness that comes to the way in which you're doing that. If we've not got the processes and the mentorship and the guidance and the coaching that can actually develop clinicians in that way, then it just seems so bizarre to imply that, well, yeah, you roll a bit of a dice and sometimes you get the biscuit muncher and sometimes you get the absolutely brilliant clinician. It's like, no, I'm not all right with that. And you'd never accept that. And it doesn't scale brilliantly, right? But we would never accept that in our business, would we, Jim, right? And I don't think we're tyrants. And I don't just mean this on the clinical side. Let's just be safe and just talk about physio matters now. Is that when the junior team or even our casual team are working on leading a webinar, on a masterclass or a therapy live or something like that, is that we're not heavy-handed with the feedback, but it's just that they're often the sorts of characters that are craving that feedback. It's often unfamiliar. And so we then would create that. And then they've got template guidance as to making sure what they hit. These things that just little prompts and reminders to put the poll up on the screen. And we might sometimes miss that, but the process of development is something that both they're craving, but we're willing to give without it being a telling off. And that, of course, we're not pretending that can scale to the tens and hundreds of thousands of consultations and clinicians easily, but let's not pretend it's not something that can be put in shape. And I kind of, it terrifies me how complacent I think people can get. I worry so much as a massive advocate and fan and supporter, and we work with more NHS clinicians than anyone. I'm such a fan of free at the point of care, healthcare, taxation funded as a baseline. I get worried about the fact that I do think this is an inherent flaw to that. I don't think it's something that's therefore not sortable, but what I'm meaning is that there is just not a version of that depth of complacency that couldn't exist, that could exist in something that was that was smaller and more well controlled. Right? It's really tricky, and so it's something that I think more effort needs to be done to stop that complacency occurring. And then other models and private models have other challenges, but they don't have this problem. They've got other problems, sometimes even worse problems, but they've not got this problem. And I think that complacency, and if you think about just to give people an example, if they wonder what I mean, is that in a private consultation, of which was as bad as the one that you had, you literally, the feedback mechanism is there over the fact that you then refuse to see him again quite directly. You won't pay for him. If they ask you to tap on the machine on the way out for that, you might have some. There's points of friction that mean that comes to the fore, and they're exposed to having to learn from that. And eventually they're going to struggle to make a living doing that if that's the case. Whereas if the feedback loop isn't as direct, or you're able to go around them, and there just happened to be one person of which you didn't choose to see anyway, those things can perpetuate easier in that system to my taste. And that worries me as someone that wants to advocate for quality all the time.
Yeah, and maybe I'll come back and we'll revisit this conversation if we do a private consultation, and I'll see the difference.
Yeah.
And to your point there, we've had conversations about, booking more appointments and going, she said, I hope I don't get that lady again. But you can't, in this situation, you can't pick and choose. Now, you could make a complaint, I suppose, but that's a very, you really are taking a step up to do that.
And it's really subjective as well, isn't it?
And it's really subjective. And, you've probably done it as well, but you end up you'll have been on the end of complaints, before, not necessarily that you're the one being complained about, but you're involved.
Handling,
correct. Yeah, that's what I mean. And they just, no matter how well they're written, they often just sound like, I didn't get what I wanted. It's very hard to write a complaint like that actually spells out your exact. Maybe I'll send them this podcast. And we'll get struck off our GP surgery. But I think it's fascinating to me because, like you said, you wouldn't, if you were a car salesman or something, they're notoriously the other direction, and so these are issues that can be solved. And certainly you have to really work as an individual on how you as an individual do that. And training helps you. And I think that within learning that kind of consultation, doing it outside of the actual consultations and just learning by experience, a lot of people would very much dislike the role play type aspects that you would have to employ to try and, like, for me, it's just the worst. I can do a consultation with people with all day, every day if it was necessary. But if you wanted me to do a role play scenario, it's so difficult to do, and I think that puts people off actually, learning that skill. And I think you need both, because you need that direct feedback. Like you say, you need to be doing it with your colleagues, so your colleague can go, actually, I didn't like the way you interrupted there. But it's so jarring as an individual, that kind of feedback, because you're almost, like you said at the beginning, it's like a masking type approach. You want to take some of your personality into the appointment, but probably not all of it.
You've got to channel it into an appropriate professional framework, right? And this is what's weird. Culturally, I find it really fascinating to witness. Is there's a trend and not just a healthcare thing, but it's like bringing your whole self to work. It's just, we know that the cartoonish extremes of that is so obviously silly. Like, no one actually thinks that. But as a phrase, what its meaning is that the system needs to shape to you and your widest diversity and your style and your substance and your biscuit eating habits, right? It's just like the professional framework in which you need to turn up in. And we're so fortunate, aren't we? And let's not forget to keep repeating this, is that the way in which we're able to shape our consultations, our facilities, our patient experience, the stiffness or not of the hinges of the front door of the building, right? You can control more variables through the independent practice, right? It's not an accident we've ended up there as a means of demonstrating best practice, of which we advocate on the internet, right? That's what we do. I just can't believe, though, that people don't recognize that can be and should be refined, and that mentorship and support and coaching in the ways you're describing it needs to occur, and that if it's awkward, if it's uncomfortable, if your team's too small, too large, whatever it might be to do it, the process and mechanism of doing that is crazy. And I think increasingly the way in which we've talked before, just in MSK terms, but I know it applies across the piece, is the hollowing out of the middle of any department, any system, where you've got folk increasingly in suits inside rooms making triage decisions, and you've got your shop floor is increasingly undereducated, often, because of COVID and changes to the education system. So you've not got that support, that apprenticeship, that preceptorship we often talk about, which is crazy. And I hope you all know as you listen to this that this breaks our heart, even though it makes us money, because that's exactly what Physio Matters is selling into that gap. And we don't like doing that. We're increasingly making content for that. We hear your cries of concerns. We're creating pathways. We're not going to ever spoon feed you. We'll send you in the direction of companies that will. But we are providing content of which bridges that gap. It breaks our heart that the gap exists. It breaks our heart that the gap increasingly exists, but we will do so. And despite the fact that that is something that we then sell into, we'd rather it didn't exist. Like, I promise you that. We'd do ourselves out of work for the betterment of the fact that these, for patients such as Lauren, are suffering under that variation in care. And we titled this Navigating the System. And I just want to, my last point, and I'll bring you in to finish, Jim, is often second opinion work, particularly private second opinion work, is working as an advocate that can help them to find the appropriate language, as well as you then advocate for them. Not to then hold the system to account, but just to help to refine that. These 10 different opinions, let's tidy that up. Admittedly, this is mine, but I don't want that to be an 11th opinion. I want that to be something that accounts for these other 10. And then helping to refine that. Now, you often offer an opinion back into the system, to the surgeons, to the consultants, to the other therapists in the wider team, or back to the FCP or something like that, that then sometimes you're inviting them to challenge you back and engage in that. And that's difficult as an outsider, but sometimes just helping that patient to know that someone can at least have the time to support them on that and help them navigate the system. I've found it fascinating because I've done that for so long with patients, with parents of patients. And then also when you then notice the same thing with family members, when you even notice the same thing with yourself, when you put yourself to, well, if I didn't understand that jargon or know where to go looking for it on PubMed, then I would not follow that. And I remember that was really fascinating when we obviously had a complex pregnancy of twins and all the niche that comes with that. And so you witness the good, bad and ugly there. But also the fact that then we pinch ourselves that we were able to then get stuck into the NICE guidance for that specific type of twin pregnancy, right? And I'm glad we were able to do that, as well as being cocksure enough to then hold them to that if they felt like it was deviating, or at least inviting, as we did, to say, why is it we're deviating from it? Because it's fine that we are. We know what that's like with NICE guidance, but just out of interest, what are the reasoning behind that? And some of those welcomed those conversations, and some clinicians bristled. And it's that for me is the mark of a true professional. So navigating the system is a fascinating challenge, and it's something that we need to probably think more of. I'm sorry you've experienced it as a family in the good, the bad and the ugly of that, but hopefully this has been a useful and cathartic exercise, as Chewy and Jim often is. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap?
We need to do our new segments of Would You Rather. Would you want to do that?
Brilliant.
Which
Let's
is actually
as long as it's a minute. As long as it's only like a quick one, I'll try and
in a really good spot, because it's actually kind of speaking to what we spoke. So my would you rather is, if you had to, would you choose to either only be able to talk in lay language or only be able to talk in jargon? So you got one extreme.
In a professional context.
In all contexts ever. You can only use So even in no jargon at all ever.
Absolutely, I could not. What about you?
Yeah. I find it hard because I could argue either direction, but I think it would have to be lay language.
I couldn't do it. I think you'd be better at it than me on the jargon side. But no, if you think about me, is that the minute I even start talking jargon, I hear myself and I think of a metaphor. Now that metaphor might be terrible, but I do it, and I just feel like that's how I do it. I've got really abstract language, and I'll meander, and so I don't think it'd even be feasible. But that's definitely a good one.
Yeah, lovely. Right, well, that's it. We can wrap now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'm not going to give you an opportunity to.
Chewy and Jim, chatting along on their old pod feed. Chewy and Jim, HR keeps them afloat. We go to play and have a look with Chewy's gags, Jim's dashing looks. The world wishes their views were tame, so Chewy and Jim just take the blame. Chewy and Jim, just get